Summer Lee, more interested in fighting Democrats than getting results.
A super PAC saying she's not a loyal Democrat while they're endorsing over 100 Republicans.
Well, it turns out that Bernie Sanders was right once again. So in this video, I will show you what he was right about. I will show you an attack ad that has to do with this story, and I will show you Bernie Sanders being pissed off at such attacks. So, starting off with what this is about. This piece in the New York Times, Bernie Sanders prepares for war with AIPAC and its Super PAC, the pro-Israel group, which is involved with direct political spending this year for the first time, has opposed progressive candidates backed by Mr. Sanders. Now, this story is crappy, for a lack of a better term. This is about a ton of money being spent against progressive candidates because they simply recognize the humanity of Palestinians. So because they are vocal about that, because they recognize groups like Human Rights Watch, like Amnesty International, like B'Tselem, an Israel-based human rights organization, they've all called Israel an apartheid state because of their treatment of Palestinians, their clear and obvious, blatant human rights abuses. Because they have recognized, these candidates have recognized those things, these pro-Israel groups, conservative pro-Israel groups, are spending money against Democrats, pretending that these Democrats are not democratic enough or not true Democrats, even though this same group is funding Republicans. So first, I want to show you an example of their attack ad. So Chris Hayes, actually, to my surprise, he is good sometimes, did a great piece on this. So I'm going to show you a bit of his commentary here, and he's going to play an attack ad on Summer Lee that has to do with this.
I mean, if the United Democracy Project, right, wants to spend millions of dollars running ads saying Summer Lee is critical of Israel and we don't think she should be, support Steve Irwin because he will stand by Israel, well, then, have at it. That's democracy, at least in the Citizens United version. That's sort of how it works now. But the thing is, they recognize Israel is not the top issue for the voters in Pennsylvania's 12th district. And so what they did instead was launch an almost comically disingenuous attack claiming Lee is not a real Democrat.
She calls herself a Democrat, but Summer Lee said she wanted to dismantle the Democratic Party, dismantle it, and she's done everything in her power to do just that. When Joe Biden was running against Trump, Summer Lee attacked Biden's character, said he'd take us backwards, and Lee refused to support Biden's infrastructure plan that's now rebuilding bridges and roads in western Pennsylvania. Summer Lee, more interested in fighting Democrats than getting results. UDP is responsible for the content of this ad.
Now, I will get to Summer Lee's race and whether or not these ads were effective. But first, this is an example of the kind of garbage they put out there. Here is a group that has endorsed over 100 Republicans, many of which did not vote to certify the election for Joe Biden. Yet here they are claiming Summer Lee, not a real Democrat. So I'm going to show you now. This is Bernie Sanders on the campaign trail with Summer Lee before Summer Lee's election day or primary day. So here he is discussing these very attacks.
These ads paid for by AIPAC are attacking Summer because he's not a loyal enough Democrat. Well, what you should know is that this organization is funding over 100 Republican candidates or endorsing. So here you have a super PAC saying she's not a loyal Democrat while they're endorsing over 100 Republicans, including many who even refuse to acknowledge that Joe Biden won the election.
All right, so I'll get to how Bernie was right because there's a little more backstory to this, and I'll also get to Summer Lee's race and if she was able to overcome all this money being spent against her. But first here on Bernie Sanders. He's angry, and I know he's angry a lot about, he's angry for the right things. But you even see here when he's talking about this, there's a little more anger in his voice than there even normally is. And for good reason. I mean, these are completely dishonest attack ads that have sunk campaigns already of people he endorsed. So Nina Turner was sunk by all this garbage money from AIPAC. Nina Alem that same week eventually lost her race because, at least partly because, of that money being spent against her. Jessica Cisneros, her race is coming up next week. Another candidate that Bernie has backed. This is a pro-choice progressive candidate going up against Henry Cuellar. Henry Cuellar is an anti-choice Democrat, the only one left in the House, backed by Nancy Pelosi. Even though this massive story going on with Roe v. Wade, Democratic leadership still backing Henry Cuellar over Cisneros. Absolutely disgusting, but they're also spending money against, or AIPAC's also spending money against Cisneros, so we'll see how that goes. But a little more on Bernie's anger here, because this is not something I normally see from him online. But check this out. So on the 13th, he tweeted out, with very few exceptions, Dave Weigel being one of them, nobody in the mainstream media is covering the major story of this primary season, and that is how billionaires through AIPAC are spending millions to defeat progressive candidates. Now, what's amazing about this is two things. One, he's being very specific here about a certain journalist and about a certain group. You know, often if you check Bernie's account, it's usually like Medicare for all should be should be instituted, and people should have health care, and wages should be higher, and he'll retweet like the Starbucks union stuff. So he gets engaged in these fights and that kind of thing, but he rarely really goes after and names the groups and people that he is attacking and people to support in that sense, like or people to their work to prop up here, like the way he's doing with Dave Weigel. So that's a rarity for him. And also, after this tweet came out is when that that coverage by Chris Hayes came out. So Chris Hayes may have seen this tweet and was like, this is a story I should be covering, and decided to cover it, showing you again the importance of politicians like this using their platform to put pressure and change the narrative within media. That's what progressives in Congress should be doing a lot more of right now, is using their platform to try and change media narratives. Bernie does that with this, and follows it up, by the way, because AIPAC replied to this, saying AIPAC is proud to stand with pro-Israel progressive leaders running against anti-Israel candidates. Bernie replies, saying AIPAC stands with pro-Israel Democrats and Republicans. They stand with Republican insurrectionists who refuse to certify Biden's election, but mostly they stand with billionaires who want a two-party system that is united in support of large corporations and the rich, directly calling out the powerful AIPAC group. Incredible. Now, let's get to Summer Lee and then the backstory on how Bernie was right. So Summer Lee, here's her race. She is winning. In some cases has won. So I'm saying that, or in some sense has won. I'm saying that because Dave Wasserman, who often calls these races online, he's already called it for Summer Lee. It's not been officially called by the Associated Press, though it may soon be. But here you have a very close race. So ahead by 737 votes. And this race has been insane. So, a few months ago, she was well ahead in polling. That was before AIPAC came in with all this dishonest money and this dishonest ads. And then while the votes were being counted, Lee was down by like 20 points at the beginning. Came back to then lead by, what is it, like 7 points here? Or sorry, 0.7 points. So in terms of a recount, which may happen, when it comes to these districts, so statewide races, if the difference is 0.5 or under, then there's a recount. But for districts like this, there has to be apparently a voter petition for there to be a recount. So I'm not sure if, Steve Irwin here has enough signatures for a petition to get a recount. I guess we're going to see if that happens. But this, even though it seems really small, it does seem like a comfortable lead enough to even squeak out a victory, even if there is a recount. But we're going to have to see for sure 100% if she is the victor here. But it does seem that she won, and that is incredible. To overcome all that money being spent against her, all those dishonest attack ads, absolutely amazing. Now, in terms of how Bernie was right, let's start with this. Back in 2020, as you see here, Sanders said, won't attend AIPAC conference, accuses it of providing platform for bigotry. So he was attacked back then for saying this. This is Jonathan Greenblatt of the Anti-Defamation League, which is usually good, but sometimes gets it wrong. So He tweeted out here back then, this is again back in 2020, saying it's offensive that Bernie Sanders denigrates the AIPAC policy conference as a platform for bigotry at a time when we see a surge of real hate across the U.S. It's irresponsible to describe AIPAC like this. ADL proudly will be there. Well, I love this tweet by Matt Dussier saying Bernie was right. 2 years later, AIPAC has endorsed over 100 pro-insurrection candidates, including some who promote the Great Replacement conspiracy theory. Still proud to work with them? You haven't said. You seem to have lots of time to go after progressive activists, though. Yeah. So, Bernie, once again, was right.